Hello and welcome. Today, I'm joined by David Shapiro, the founder of Law Offices of David Shapiro, a premier trust and estate litigation firm based in Los Angeles. David has built a powerhouse practice by narrowing his focus specifically to high-stakes probate and beneficiary disputes, navigating some of the most complex legal waters in California. We are going to dive into how David transitioned from a broad practice to hyper-specialized niche and why he believes that the middle market law firm is an endangered species. David, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you very much for having me.
David, could you tell us what happened in your practice in 2007 and how's that driving your practice today?
So I would say the biggest change was that I was doing a lot of real estate litigation and a variety of other areas of law. I had a general broad practice. I did everything in criminal offense, but my background was in trust and estate and environmental law, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So around 2007, the real estate market in California got really heated up, and there was a change in the environment of practicing law in real estate. What happened was there were a lot of bankruptcies, there were a lot of foreclosures, and that started happening in 2007, 2008. My practice also had the trust and estate work, because generally, at least when you start off, it's great to have at least two areas of law while you're practicing. Now, as you build up, I realized that I needed to make a transition into one area of law and focus directly on that area. And I chose trust and estate work because I found the work really interesting. I found the stories incredibly compelling. Mm-hmm. I like telling stories, and it kind of fit within my strengths. Like, there are certain areas of law that it really isn't necessarily to my strengths. But this area I found to be very much into my strength because there's a lot of chess and strategy involved in this area of law. So there's a lot of analysis, and that fit right into my strength.
That sounds great. And I think a big concern that some firms have, some smaller practices, is that if they narrow down to a niche, they will get less work, they will get less referrals. But as history showed, that's not the case for you. Your practice actually grew when you became specialized in that particular area.
Absolutely. I would say that that was kind of surprising to me, because I felt very much like a need at that point of my practice to take whatever came in the door. Right? You don't want to turn away a paying client when you're just building up your practice. But then what I realized was, as I referred cases out, I'd established an attorney network where people would bring work into me. So this even became even more powerful when I decided I wasn't going to do estate planning anymore. So I started referring out my estate planning cases. Well, those same estate planners started referring me cases because they knew they weren't going to be competed with in their area. So what happens is more and more attorneys have specialized over the years. They don't want people want to refer out work to someone that will respect them. If they find a case that's in their area, you wouldn't be inclined to just take their case, even if it's a lucrative case, right? They know that if something falls within your category, you'll take it. If it's outside your category, you're going to assign it to someone outside your firm that can be more efficient, that can do a better job. One of the main things is just efficiencies. So when I was doing a lot of areas of law, I'd spend a lot of time researching, understanding the background to that area before I even get started. And that didn't work out to me because I had to waste a lot of time learning law that's really not applicable to my main practice areas. But more importantly, it wasn't helpful for my clients. So when I was researching and getting a better idea, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew exactly the area I thought I really understood the area. But it takes years and years in a practice area to really understand it. So I wasn't as efficient in those cases. And I see that happen all the time, especially in my area, because I'll see a civil litigator or a criminal defense attorney or someone else that doesn't practice in my space. And it's like, oh no, I've got to educate this person. I've got to explain to them why they're not doing what they need to do, because they are not being efficient with the resources of the court, and more importantly, with their client and my client in reaching a resolution to the case.
Do you think right now it will be even more important to have that specialty and to be efficient? Because with AI and with tools, there are expectations to do more, and it becomes a multiplier. And if somebody is not efficient, that also gets multiplied. But if somebody has their own practice area, they're niche down, they really know the details of the process, then those efficiencies can be multiplied as well in the current landscape legal practice.
So I think there's a lot you're asking there, but I think the first question that you're asking is really how is AI affecting the specialization in your practice? And I would say that in some level, AI is really helpful for someone that practices in a broad area of law because they can learn a variety of matters very easily, very quickly. And they'll have, you type in a question that covers something that's outside your area, and you'll get a basic overview of what's going on. But now, if you're specialized in a particular area, there's a major advantage that you have. When AI spews out their, text, you can look at it and you say, well, that's right, but that's completely wrong. No judge is going to look at it this way. This is not an effective manner in the probate courts in my county or this county. This is not an effective way to litigate the case. So you can be discerning on the responses that you get within the AI realm. So on one hand, I would certainly encourage the use of AI to better understand, areas that you're not that familiar with. But once you're in your niche, once you're in your area, the AI is helpful, but it doesn't. So an experienced attorney is going to have years of discernment and experience in an area, and the AI won't necessarily have the ability to, or the wisdom, I would say, to analyze a case in that space. And I just find it very helpful focus on my own judgment and look at the AI as just a tool to get you where you need to go.
Certainly. I think there's a very interesting bias, and I don't quite remember what it's called, but if an expert looks at the output of AI in the area where, like you described, they have expertise, they can spot when something is quite off quite quickly. But when the same person usually asks about the area when it's not the area of expertise, the answer is just accepted at the face value. So we need to be very mindful, and it can be a good tool, but to your point, we need to be very, very careful about how we're using it.
We don't know, right?
Exactly. Those are the blind spots. David, you mentioned that one of the advantages of why you were able to specialize on the area that you like is you like the strategy, you like the chess aspect of it. What other benefits, maybe on a personal level, were for you once you narrowed down your practice and you started to streamline your work around, one particular niche?
So I would say there's a lot of advantages I had. Obviously, the best advantage was to my clients. The biggest advantage was to my clients. I could be more efficient with my time. I could be focused on getting the result that I want, and I could get them the result they want. And more importantly, I could understand what their goals are very quickly, because although you have, thousands of cases that come through your door, a lot of the fact patterns are repetitive. So each case has its own unique set of facts, but they have a generalized story, an arch that goes from one case to the next case. And you can see how different cases fall in that path. So when someone walks into your door and they tell you their story, you say, oh, well, this is, I can see the undue influence going on here. I can see this. I can see the isolation. They may not even understand what is going on. They may not even understand what is happening in their family or with their caregiver or whatever. But as an experienced practitioner in that area, you can. So I would say that the biggest advantage is just for each client, right? Your clients get a better they have someone that really understands their case on that first consultation.
It's pattern recognition, basically, isn't it? When you see those set of scenarios and you can see, well, this is very similar to this case, and you can anticipate some things and you can help them before, something goes wrong, or you can basically be more efficient with the advice as well, because you have that pattern that you've seen many, many times over.
Absolutely. Pattern recognition is a large part of what we do as humans. I would say also it's compassion, building up compassion for your clients as well. So I would say there's two elements of being human that happen as you practice more and more in the practice area. One is that you are more inclined to understand the fact patterns that you're in and the pattern recognition that you're referring to, but also there's the human element of compassion, where you understand just how traumatic it's been for individuals that are facing these challenges within their family. So, yeah, I would say those two components are really the key factors.
Certainly makes sense. So 2007 was the year that due to the conditions you decided to niche down and focus on. Since then, what were maybe some of the milestones for your firm and for your practice that you would mark as, you know, something significant as a new chapter for the firm?
It's a really good question. So I would say 2007 is really when I started this transition. 2008 and 2009, I got more and more focused in it. Or I think around 2010 or so, I got my specialization. It could have been 2009, it could have been 2011, but in that period, I got my specialization. And in that specialization, I just learned the area really, really well. I also wrote a book in this area, did the book on the administration side.
Mhm.
So I just did a deep dive in this practice area. I would go to MCLE events. Every single one of them came out with 4 different bar associations. So I just really dug in. So I would say the first 5 years of focusing on this area were really just the learning curve of understanding it. Then over the next 10, 12 years, my practice just grew and grew and grew. And it just grew very organically in the sense that some days it built. Some days I'd get a new case that was really exciting and really grow the practice. Other days, there'd be challenges. You have employee challenges. You have a setback in a case. There's so many different challenges that you face, and you don't even realize just how many challenges you'll have. But as the time went on, organically it grows and grows and grows. You get more and more referrals. You get more and more interesting cases. You start finding more satisfaction in your work. You really feel more confidence in what you're doing, and you just feel like you can help out your clients a lot more and more. And that to me is, I think also somewhere in that range from 2010 to 2015, that next period, I really understood that the practice of law is really just helping out people. And my focus of it became more on my clients rather than myself. So instead of building the practice, the focus became making sure that each client that came through my door had a wonderful outcome, that they felt like their lives moved forward. And by doing that, clients became more appreciative of your work. They were more likely to refer the work. Your opposing counsel could see what you were doing. They could see the results that you were getting. So they were more likely to refer cases. And it just helped build up the practice as I focused more on the client focus. So I would say that was from 2010 to 2015 I started building that up. And it just kept growing and growing and growing.
So it was a very organic, very natural progression. Would you say that it was linear, or did you have a certain moments, whether it was a key, maybe case or something else that basically became the unlock to the next stage of the growth within that?
That's a really good question. I had a tremendous growth in my practice around after COVID. I think the course just stopped during COVID. There was a 6-month period where there was just nothing going on. All your cases just sat there. But then after COVID calmed down and the courts reopened, it's just been crazy after that. It's just been case after case after case. Some weeks you're just three cases settled. Some weeks, you win this, you win that, you win that. I'm not saying every case every week is always a victory, but as you get more and more in your practice, you get more and more victorious. And since COVID, my practice has just become an incredible opportunity for me as a person to serve my community.
And it's also interesting to talk about, the cases that you're winning, and sometimes the outcome, of course, can be different. I think back to your previous point, with the pattern recognition, you can probably, and this is my guess, please tell me if you agree with me, you can manage expectations of client better because you have that niche specialty. If there is a case that maybe not strong, you're able to communicate that beforehand, and then the clients are not upset because they know what their realistic chances are and what the possible outcomes are. And that's also making it easier versus maybe a practice that have a wide range and they are not able to do that. And even though objectively they got a really good outcome for their clients, the clients might not be satisfied because they didn't get that communication. They didn't know what to expect.
I think you're right. I think that's a really important aspect. And the more I think about what you just said, the more accurate I find it to be. I'm thinking that when someone walks through my door, I can pretty much assess their case. I can tell them, hey, listen, there's 9 different judges in this courthouse that's going to be hearing this case. You're going to get different results from different judges. However, these are the likely results. And although you believe that this is a really strong component of your case, this one isn't. But this component is really something that would draw interest from the court. It seems like an important wrong that needs to be righted. So what you can look at is as your experience develops your pattern recognition, as you would say, you can look at it and see this is something that really the court just would not be interested in. Do not waste the court's time with this. You're going to have a bad result. Or you can say, okay, this is something that has more meat on the bones, and this is something that I think is a wrong that really needs to be righted. There are real damages here, and you can start working on creating your story, your compelling story from the beginning of the case. That's the other thing is not only do you get to manage the expectations, but you get to develop the story for the client to create that narrative for them so that as they go through their life, as they go through this challenge they're having, it fits within a framework, a narrative framework in their own mind of, I'm getting justice. I'm going to the court system. I'm receiving justice. This is the process. This is part of the process. And they can experience that framework. And then it's less of a stress and shock to them as they go through the system. Because the system is not an easy system. It's not a quick or expedient. It's a system that takes a long time and can be very challenging, especially for a pro per or someone that doesn't have proper representation. So absolutely, someone coming to your door, getting that framework, getting that understanding as they start, that's really helpful.
From the marketing perspective, one of the things that we often work with our partners is the diagnostic element before the services are being provided. Usually the analogy we use is that, a medical profession, they need to diagnose before they prescribe. In professional services, and unfortunately we sometimes see that in law as well, sometimes attorneys are very eager to jump on the case and start doing before they had that conversation when, like you just described, their client understands the story, they understands what their chances are, what the outcome is likely to be, and what factors there are. And that diagnostic element is missing from the consultation. When you work with somebody, when you help them identify that story, what do you typically want the people that become your clients, what do you want them to know before they even walk through the door and have that initial conversation with you so that they are better prepared to understand what the next steps would be?
The analogy you're making to a diagnosis with a physician, I think there's a lot of similarities in practice of law. We need to test their case. One of the most important things that we can get when someone walks in the door is here's the trust, here's the correspondences, here are the communications, here are the facts. And if we don't have that information, we're going to give an incorrect diagnosis because we're not going to understand the dynamics of the case. The other aspect is first thing a doctor usually will do is they'll order tests. Okay, they'll gather more information. That's the discovery process in the California litigation system or the American litigation system. So you have sent out written requests for documents. You'll send out, you'll depose key witnesses. Those are all tests. You're testing the narrative of the case. And you're going to find out if you have a concrete view of your case when you start off, your case is going to crack. If you have a flexible, organic view of your case and you're observant, you'll see how the narrative changes as the facts come in.
Are the clients typically forthcoming with all information, or do you sometimes have when maybe they like not necessarily misrepresent, but maybe they like to omit certain things because they're worried how it will affect their case, and their initial reaction is not to disclose something that might be quite fundamental for how you progress with your work?
I think what you're hitting on is a real problem. Okay, when someone comes to their attorney, it makes a lot of sense to be open and honest with the attorney, because you're absolutely right. If someone misrepresents the facts of their case, they're going to be misdiagnosed,
Hmm.
and they're going to go, something's going to happen to them that, well, not something's going to happen to them. What's going to happen is they're going to end up harming their case, because they're going to end up putting resources in places where they shouldn't be, and they're going to miss parts that really need to be developed. So it happens a lot that someone will feel uncomfortable coming into my door. I will try to make someone comfortable. I can't always make someone comfortable. If I find someone is misrepresenting the facts to me multiple times in the initial interview, I thank you very much and really appreciate your time and your attention, but this is not a case I'd be interested in, right? If I do take the case and I find out additional facts, it's important to be candid to the client very early in the case. Absolutely, you do learn facts throughout the entire case, even towards the end of it.
I think a big part of that is also building the relationship. That the more trust that the client has with their attorney, the less likely they are to try to misrepresent that or omit certain things. They understand the importance that they need to be as forthcoming as possible. And David, you mentioned that you like the work, you find it's very strategic, you want to help the community as well. What have been some of the things that you've done throughout the history of the firm that basically helped you to serve the community, maybe outside of the immediate clients that you took on?
So now you're talking about the legal community at large, and there is certain pro bono activities that I've done in the community. One of the things was, and I haven't been doing this as much as I would like to do, just because of time, is I used to serve on the LA Superior Court mediation panel. It was through the San Fernando Bar Association, and basically what would happen is someone would come in and they would have their cases. And maybe I'd have 4 cases in a day even, and we would have to resolve all 4 of the cases that these litigants were in. Sometimes I would be able to use my perspective to help put cases in that framework because of the pattern recognition that you're referring to, and I was able to resolve cases expeditiously, and that was a really rewarding experience. I think I was able to serve the community really well with that. I would like to be doing more and more of that, just I haven't had the time. Another component that I think is really important is getting the best judges on the bench. And we have in LA County or in California, there's 2 ways that someone gets on the bench. One of them is through appointment from the governor, and there isn't much involvement other than the Janney Commission that does their own investigation on that. The other is there is elections, I think every 6 years for a judge. And generally, sitting judges don't have many candidates that vie for the bench that they're on. But if there's an open seat, there are multiple candidates that are vying for that bench seat. And occasionally, there'll be a challenger to an existing judge. And I'm part of the LA County Bar Association's Judicial Election Evaluation Committee, where we interview all of the candidates. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it this cycle because of arbitration that was on right during the main meeting period, but I found that incredibly helpful in order to work towards getting the best members of the community of the bar on the bench, as opposed to someone that really lacks qualifications and experience and temperament.
Certainly. I think active participation from the whole system is quite important because, like you said, sometimes the outcome of the case is not only fact dependent, but it is dependent on who is involved. And for everybody in the community to be part of that is quite important.
Absolutely.
David, I want to talk a little bit about growing the business of law specifically. You mentioned that since 2007, you had good growth. If you are to advise somebody who is opening their firm and maybe they're starting a new practice or maybe they're starting a new office in 2026, what would be the best use of time and resources, maybe top 3 that you would recommend for somebody that wants to build their own book of business and start also building towards getting referrals for the work they've done?
That's a really good question. I can answer the first one easily. The most important thing they can do is talk to as many attorneys that are in their practice area as possible. I would call them up, ask them, hey, listen, or send them an email, say, hey, listen, I'm entering this practice area, been doing this for the last year or 2, and I went to this law school, or whatever the situation is. If they're just coming out of law school, if they have more experience, they can tell you a little bit about their experience. Say, listen, I really would love to, you flatter them. You flatter the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I'd really love to hear about how you built your practice. I'd love to hear what you're doing. Assuming an attorney has the time and the opportunity, and they want to help other attorneys because they were there themselves at some point. So what happens is you will be exposed to a tremendous amount of valuable, direct advice
Mm-hmm.
that can be useful in your practice. But more importantly, you're also building relationships, because as they talk to you and they learn a little bit about your practice and what you want to do, what's going to happen also is they're going to think, oh, I got this case that might just be a perfect fit for you. Maybe we'll work on this together until I know that you can actually do the work, or maybe it's a small enough case where you can really just get started on it.
Mm-hmm.
And as years go by and as more time goes by, you develop your relationships more and more. So I would say that the single most important thing you can do is just reaching out to other attorneys in your community and building on that work. Now, if you want me to, I can think of second and third, but I would say that would be
A starting point.
by far the most important thing you can do.
Who has been maybe that person, if you want to give a shout out to anybody that maybe helped you when you were starting, that was maybe a mentor or somebody that made the difference earlier in your career?
So there were 3 mentors I would say I had in my practice. I had this attorney, Paula Drake. She was absolutely wonderful. She was incredibly compassionate, just got me started at the very beginning. I was doing I did criminal defense work, and she was telling me how to get on certain panels and get experience and doing all that stuff. This is like 2002, 2003. This was just starting out my practice when I first really opened up my doors to work. Second was another attorney, Chris Armenta. She was wonderful. She was a experienced litigator. And around 2005, we were both doing a little bit of real estate litigation, but she was doing it at a much higher level. And she helped me along as I developed my basic skills of litigation. And then my third mentor, and I would say one that really just was very meaningful, even though it was over only like a month that I worked with him, was Jerry Spence, the great trial lawyer. Some people like to think he was the best trial lawyer of the late 20th century. I spent about a month on his ranch in Wyoming with other attorneys, developed my skill at something called the Trial Lawyers College. And he was so generous with his time and attention to me and to the other attorneys. And he had such a great community of other attorneys that I really learned to advocate and tell my client's story. So I would say that those were the 3 most important in my practice. Now, there were other, obviously, mentors I had while I was in law school and other parts of my life, but those were the 3 that I think helped me most in my practice.
Thank you for sharing. That's good to hear. When you think about the goals that you are setting for yourself for the rest of 2026, what is the main thing that you would want to achieve by the end of the year to be very satisfied that you had a good year and you've done exactly what you set out to be?
So another thing that I did maybe about 8 or 10 years ago, I think it really helped out my practice, was I set out and I wrote down goals for 1 year, for 3 years, for 5 years. And I just literally wrote them down. And I hit all those goals. And I thought my 5-year goals were ridiculously out of reach 5 years before that point. And I hit them, right? So I love the idea of goals and setting up goals and writing it down. I haven't done that in a few years, but maybe I should do that again. I have this one particular case I've been working on that I have a personal goal with that case. As far as the other cases, my goals are generally for the people to walk out and have a wonderful experience and get the best possible result for that particular case. But I don't have any broad goals in my practice because, to be honest with you, I really don't want to grow my practice significantly more. Like I feel like the amount of time I spend in management is more than I'd like it to be. And I do enjoy practicing law. So as you spend more and more time managing your practice, you spend less and less time actually practicing law. And it's not my goal to just have this giant business that operates without my direct involvement in practice.
I think that's a very good point. And unfortunately, my marketing colleagues sometimes get a bad rep for that because the typical notion is that it's almost growth at any cost. It's always more, it's always bigger. But the truth of the matter is, for many attorneys, like I'd imagine for yourself, having more of a business that's built around what you find interesting and the work you find rewarding is the main goal. So it's not the pursuit of just more at any cost, but it's creating a practice that makes you happy, gets best possible result for your clients, and makes a difference for the community. And protecting that and making sure that there is a quality, not just quantity, is the most important thing. And I think that's also a very valid goal, even when it comes, to the general marketing advice as well.
I think you're right on. I think that practicing law is a profession. It's not a business. I have no interest in uh, doing an IPO or selling my practice to a private equity firm. I don't think either one would be legal or ethical. It stems from individuals connecting to their community. Once you lose touch of that, you're less likely to get satisfaction.
That's an interesting take, and I know many of my guests agreed with it as well. And something that we discussed before we started recording is that there's also a trend with private equity entering the space and turning that from a profession, like you described it, to a business, where because of that, the middle ground is disappearing. There are less mid-sized law firms because private equity is entering it, and it's changing the dynamic of market. And for some clients and for some industries, it's a good thing. For others, maybe not so much, but that is the trend that definitely we are seeing, and it sounds like that's been your experience as well.
I don't know if any private equity firms have locked in my niche. I've had several contact me, but I would think that the work that I do on some level is, at least in my perspective, spiritual.
Mm,
You're dealing with the loss, with death, you're dealing with justice, and those all go there. For me, I find that work very soulful.
mm.
I just couldn't imagine turning it over to the wheels of capitalism, which I'm a big fan of and I respect, but not necessarily in this space.
That's a very true observation. David, for somebody that's local to California and to Los Angeles, if somebody wants to learn more about the work that you do, where can they learn more online?
You can just go to davidshapirolaw.com. I've got a website, and yeah, you can learn a little bit about what we do, and you can reach out. And I've got a great intake person, Seven. You can give her a call, and she'll listen to your story and get a better idea of what's going on, and see if I can assist.
David, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Alex, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.